Hi, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the wild and exciting world of protocol amendments. These are actually an administrative issue, but it's important for you to understand why they happen, why they don't happen, and how they impact your role as a research coordinator. So let's talk about protocol amendments. So let's start by talking about the investigator's role and why the protocol is important. 312.60 says, and we already know this, the investigators are responsible for the rights, safety, and welfare of subjects that participate under their care during a clinical trial. Maintaining and adhering and following the protocol is really good for this purpose because the protocol is written to minimize risks and everything in it is really done to enhance safety and welfare. So for the investigator, and i.e. the research coordinator, to follow the protocol is one really important way to make sure that everybody who's participating in the study has the rights and safety maintained. This is also outlined in FDA Form 1572. On the second page in number 9, this says commitments. I agree to conduct the studies in accordance with the protocols and will only make changes after notifying the sponsor, except when necessary to protect the safety, rights, or welfare of subjects. So remember, the investigator signs this form, and in signing it, he or she is legally binding themselves to this agreement. They will follow the protocol. Also on the Form 1572 is the statement, additionally, I will not make any changes in the research without IRB approval, except where necessary to eliminate apparent immediate hazards to human subjects. So if there's an immediate hazard to someone or some people participating in a study, the FDA, the IRB, and the sponsor are going to fall back upon the immediate professional best judgment of the investigator to make changes, only to eliminate the hazards. So other than an immediate hazard, everything has to be followed in the protocol. So what's the investigator's role under ICH E6? The investigator may implement a deviation from or a change in the protocol to eliminate immediate hazard to trial subjects without prior approval. And this is the same thing again, it's just the ICH saying if there's an immediate hazard, yes, we would like you to avoid, if the investigator knows that there's something that is an immediate hazard and therefore requires a deviation, then that is acceptable. So what's the sponsor role in all of this? A sponsor should submit a protocol amendment describing any change, this is for phase 1 studies, that significantly affects the safety of subjects. So if the safety has changed, so the way the study is written, if findings are becoming evident, then the protocol should be amended to improve the safety for the subject. Or in a phase 2 or 3 protocol, anything that changes significantly affects the safety of subjects, the scope of the investigation, or the scientific quality of the study. So now the scope really broadens to include not just safety, but how big the scope of the study is going to be, or the scientific quality. So those are some of the reasons why, according to 312, the sponsor would make an amendment. So the investigator is going to make an amendment only to reduce immediate hazards, but the sponsor is going to have a responsibility to make amendments not only for safety, but amendments for the scope of the investigation, because as information is being found out, they might want to change the direction of the study or the scientific quality of the study, because the sponsor is responsible for all these things and the investigator is only responsible for the patients. Some things good examples, according to this definition on the last slides. So some good examples of when a sponsor would initiate an amendment: increasing the dosage or the duration of exposure to drug. So increase in dosage is pretty obvious, but for example, if the current plan requires patients get dosed once a day, and the sponsor wants to increase it to twice a day based on information that's coming from the pharmacokinetic analysis, that would be an amendment that would be necessary because the duration of exposure might also increase the risk. Significant increase in the number of subjects. This is back to sort of the research quality. So there's going to be a statistician at the sponsor or the CRO that's going to make the determination how many participants need to be on the study. If something is changed about the scope of the study or the quality of the research, there might need to be more participants in the study. So a significant increase would require an amendment. Now, I'm not talking about your study needed 300 patients across 10 sites and 304 were enrolled. I'm talking about where a study that needed 300 participants now needs 620 participants. That's a significant increase. And the IRB or the sponsor would write an amendment for that. Significant change in the design of a protocol, whether it be adding an additional arm of patients, adding, again, back to the statistical design, adding more patients, anything that really, the whole design of the protocol, that's going to require an amendment. Any new test or procedure done for safety, this is going to be requiring an amendment. The IRB is going to definitely want to know if you're adding a new safety test or safety procedure, what was that based on? Apparently there was some finding of adverse events that necessitated adding additional safety measures, so that's definitely an amendment. Deleting a test, that any kind of a lab test or any kind of monitoring for safety, getting rid of it. The IRB is definitely going to want to know why. And it might be something as simple as the preclinical animal studies indicated there would be a problem, but it never actually materialized. So there could be safety procedures done and put in the protocol in anticipation of adverse events that never happened, never materialized, and the sponsor might say, we'd like to get rid of that test, and here's why. Now, you will find that amendments are few and far between. Now, I don't know of any study, I've never done a study where there wasn't at least one amendment. But sometimes you would look at a protocol and you would think, well, there's errors in this protocol. Why don't they just write a new study, right? Give me an amendment. So it could be something as simple as typos and in some discrepancies and some little things like that. And you think, why don't they just amend it and send it to me? It's very expensive for sponsors to do this, so they're usually very reticent. One amendment can cost upwards of $200,000. So what happens, sponsors will sort of, they will stockpile all the changes they need to make, and they will do them all in one fell swoop. So they will wait to make typographical corrections and things like that until there's a real necessity for an amendment. And so there are a lot of costs associated with this on the sponsor's end. So some direct costs include having people to draft the amendment, right? You have to pay people to do the work. Distributing the amendment to all the investigators. The bigger the study, the more expensive this is going to get. If it's a phase 1 study, there's 1 or 2 investigators, easy peasy. But when we're talking about a phase 3 or phase 4 study, this can be a lot of people. Retraining the investigators. If it's a significant amendment, that might mean coming out to all the investigative sites and doing face-to-face training with them. Renegotiating contracts. So a small amendment change, adding a lab, or let's even say a good example is deleting a lab that was once required for safety would not necessarily require a new contract. But if my sponsor said, well, now we want you to, there were no MRIs required on this study, and now we want to do 2 MRIs for everybody who's on the study, that's going to be a big expense at the site, and they're going to want to renegotiate those contracts. So now this gets expensive in terms of the sponsor having their legal department look at it, all this kind of stuff. Reprogram the electronic data capture system or redesigning the case report forms can be really expensive if the amendment is going to change the data that is collected, and it probably will. So this could be very expensive. And then database revisions to accommodate the data changes internally at the sponsor. And these are a lot of direct costs that can add up. Indirect costs, these are what we would refer to as the hidden costs. These are still important too, even though they are hidden. These are hard to quantify, but they can have a big impact on a very small sponsor. Interruption for sponsors, staff, and changes in priorities. So small companies will have a bigger impact on them. The big worldwide Eli Lilly and Merck companies, not so much. But a very small sponsor, taking staff off the projects they're working on and putting them on this amendment and changing their priorities and their workload can cause then lost opportunity costs. So lost opportunity costs are nothing more than you missed the boat on something. So in a small sponsor, this means the reprioritization can have a lag effect on additional studies or additional drugs that are being developed. So you can see why these are really hard to quantify, but they are nonetheless affect the operating expenses of the sponsors. So here are the references. I always love your questions. I'm more than happy to talk to you anytime you have them. So give me a holler, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.